What if I told you that the trait you have been praised for your entire life, your kindness, your helpfulness, your ability to get along with everyone, your unwillingness to create conflict, is not actually a virtue, but a disease? A disease that is slowly killing everything authentic about you. What if the very quality that makes people say you are such a good person is the same quality that prevents you from being a real person? What if your niceness is not kindness, but cowardice? Your helpfulness is not generosity, but fear. Your agreeableness is not flexibility, but self-abandonment. And what if this disease to please is so socially acceptable, so culturally celebrated, so deeply embedded in your identity that you do not even recognize you are sick? You have spent your life being the person everyone can count on, the one who says yes when everyone else says no, the one who accommodates, adjusts, and adapts to keep everyone comfortable, the one who smooths over conflicts, meets everyone's needs, and never asks for too much in return. You are reliable, agreeable, low maintenance. People love you for these qualities. They tell you how wonderful you are, how grateful they are for you, how they do not know what they would do without you. And you feel good about this. You feel valuable. You feel needed. You feel like you are doing life right by being so good to others. But beneath the performance, beneath the smile, beneath the constant accommodation, you are dying. Your authentic self is suffocating under the weight of everyone else's expectations and needs. Your desires are buried so deep, you do not even know what they are anymore. Your boundaries are so non-existent that you do not know where you end and others begin. Your identity is so wrapped up in being helpful and nice that you have no idea who you are when you are not serving someone else's agenda. You are empty, exhausted, resentful, and completely alone despite being surrounded by people who claim to care about you. This is the disease to please. It masquerades as virtue. It is celebrated as goodness. It is encouraged by everyone who benefits from your self-abandonment. But it is killing your soul slowly, invisibly, one yes at a time, one boundary violation at a time, one moment of self-betrayal at a time. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will understand the psychology of people-pleasing, why it is disease rather than virtue, how it has infiltrated every area of your life, and most importantly, how to cure yourself of this socially celebrated sickness before it consumes everything authentic about you. This is not about becoming cruel or selfish. This is about recognizing that chronic self-abandonment to gain approval is not love, kindness, or virtue. It is fear-based behavior that creates suffering for you and dysfunction in your relationships. This is about learning to value yourself as much as you value everyone else, to honor your needs as seriously as you honor theirs, to live for your own approval rather than constantly seeking theirs. This is about curing the disease to please before it kills your soul completely. Chapter 1. The pathology of people-pleasing. To understand why people-pleasing is disease rather than virtue, you must first understand what is actually happening psychologically when you chronically please others at your own expense. People-pleasing is not kindness. Kindness comes from overflow, from choosing to give because you want to and can. People-pleasing comes from deficit, from believing you must give to be acceptable. Kindness has boundaries. People-pleasing has none. Kindness considers both self and others. People-pleasing considers only others and abandons self. These are fundamentally different psychological states with very different consequences. The people-pleaser operates from a core wound of conditional worthiness. Somewhere in your history, usually childhood, you learned that your value was contingent on your usefulness. You got attention when you helped. You received praise when you accommodated. You felt loved when you met others' needs. You also learned, implicitly or explicitly, that your authentic needs, feelings, and preferences were problems. Too much. Inconvenient. Selfish. So you learned to hide your authentic self and perform a helpful, agreeable, accommodating self that earned the love and acceptance you craved. This conditioning created a transactional understanding of relationships. Love equals service. Acceptance equals accommodation. Worth equals usefulness. If you are not helping, you are not valuable. If you are not pleasing, you are not lovable. If you are not accommodating, you will be rejected. These beliefs operate mostly unconsciously, driving your behavior without your awareness. You just feel compelled to say yes, to help, to accommodate. The compulsion feels like who you are. But it is not who you are. It is who you learned to be to survive in an environment where love was conditional. People-pleasing is a trauma response. It is fawn response, one of the 4 trauma responses alongside fight, flight, and freeze. Fawn means attempting to avoid conflict and gain safety through pleasing and accommodating the source of threat. Children in unsafe environments often develop fawn as their primary survival strategy. If I am helpful enough, good enough, undemanding enough, maybe I will be safe. Maybe I will be loved. This makes perfect sense in childhood. But when this response becomes your default mode in adulthood, it creates profound problems because you are no longer in the environment that required this adaptation. Yet the pattern persists. The disease to please operates through several interconnected mechanisms. First is hypervigilance to others' emotional states. You are constantly scanning people for signs of displeasure, disappointment, or upset. Your nervous system is on high alert, monitoring and adjusting to keep everyone comfortable. This chronic activation is exhausting. You are using enormous energy trying to manage and respond to others' emotions, leaving little energy for your own life and authentic expression. Second is external locus of control. Your emotional state depends entirely on others' reactions. If they are happy with you, you feel okay. If they are displeased, you feel distressed. You have given them complete control over your internal experience. This is inherently unstable because others' moods and reactions fluctuate based on factors having nothing to do with you. You are on an emotional roller coaster determined by others' completely unpredictable states. Third is identity diffusion. You do not have a stable sense of self separate from your role as helper and pleaser. Your identity is entirely constructed around being useful to others. Who are you when you are not helping someone? What is your value when you are not pleasing someone? These questions have no answers because you never developed an identity independent of your function for others. You are what you do for them, not a person with inherent worth. Fourth is chronic self-betrayal. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you betray yourself. Every time you accommodate someone at your own expense, you abandon yourself. Every time you hide your authentic feelings to keep peace, you reject yourself. These self-betrayals accumulate. They create internal fragmentation, resentment, and a deep sense of wrongness. You feel like you are living a lie because you are. You are performing a helpful, agreeable self, while your authentic self is screaming from beneath the performance. Fifth is boundary absence. People pleasers either have no boundaries or cannot maintain the boundaries they attempt to set. Setting a boundary feels mean, selfish, cruel. You feel responsible for others' disappointment when you set limits. So you stay boundaryless, available to everyone for everything, except to yourself for anything. This boundarylessness means you are constantly violated, drained, and taken advantage of, even by people who care about you, because you trained them that your limits do not matter. Sixth is emotional caretaking. You take responsibility for managing others' emotions. You try to make everyone happy. You smooth over conflicts. You absorb tension. You perform emotional labor constantly, even in relationships where reciprocity does not exist. You believe that others' emotional comfort is your job. This belief guarantees exhaustion because you cannot actually control others' emotions, and trying to do so is endless, futile work. Seventh is approval addiction. You need constant validation that you are good, helpful, appreciated. Any sign of disapproval triggers anxiety and desperate attempts to regain approval. You are addicted to the hit of validation you get when someone praises your helpfulness. Like any addiction, you need increasing amounts to feel okay, and you experience withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, panic, shame when approval is withheld. Eighth is resentment accumulation. Despite all your giving, you feel chronically resentful. You are angry that others do not appreciate your sacrifices, though you never told them you were sacrificing. You are bitter that they do not reciprocate, though you never asked for reciprocity. You are hurt that they take you for granted, though you trained them to do so by never indicating your needs matter. This resentment poisons your relationships and your internal experience, but you cannot express it because expressing anger would risk disapproval. Understanding people-pleasing as pathology rather than virtue reframes everything. You are not a good person being taken advantage of. You are a person with a trauma-based pattern that creates dysfunction in every relationship and prevents authentic living. You are not kind. You are afraid. You are not generous. You are compulsive. You are not flexible. You are self-abandoning. These distinctions are crucial because you cannot heal what you mislabel as virtue. The disease to please must be recognized as disease before you can begin treatment. And treatment is urgent because this disease is not benign. It is slowly killing your soul, your authenticity, your capacity for genuine connection, your sense of self. The person you could be is dying beneath the weight of the person you perform to please everyone else. Chapter 2. The childhood origins of your disease. Every case of people-pleasing traces back to childhood experiences that taught you that love was conditional on performance and that your authentic self was not acceptable. Understanding your specific origins helps you recognize the pattern as learned rather than inherent, which means it can be unlearned. The most common origin is conditional love from primary caregivers. Your parents loved you when you behaved correctly, achieved well, helped out, made them proud. Their love withdrew when you were difficult, needy, emotional, or did not meet expectations. You learned that love must be earned through performance, that you are not inherently valuable, but must constantly prove your worth. This created the foundational belief that drives all people-pleasing. I am not enough as I am, but I can become enough by pleasing others. Another common origin is emotional parentification. You were made responsible for your parents' emotional well-being. Maybe you had to manage a parent's mood, anxiety, or depression. Maybe you had to be the mediator in parental conflict. Maybe you had to be the mature, responsible one because your parents could not be. This taught you that others' emotions are your responsibility and that your needs should take a back seat to their emotional comfort. You learned to scan for emotional distress and attempt to fix it. This pattern continues in adult relationships, where you still feel responsible for everyone's emotional state. Some people pleasers grew up in chaotic, unpredictable, or unsafe environments. Maybe there was addiction, mental illness, abuse, or instability. In these environments, fawning becomes survival strategy. If I am helpful enough, quiet enough, undemanding enough, maybe I will avoid the abuse, anger, or neglect. Maybe I will create some safety or predictability in the chaos. This hypervigilance and accommodating behavior saves you as a child, but becomes prison as an adult. Others learned people-pleasing through modeling. Your parents were people-pleasers who never set boundaries, always accommodated, and taught you through example that this is how relationships work. You learned that good people do not say no, do not have needs, and always put others first. This seemed normal because it was all you saw. You replicated the pattern without questioning whether it was healthy because you had no alternative model. Some people-pleasers were praised excessively for being good, easy, helpful children. You got attention and validation for not causing problems. Your siblings might have been difficult, so you became the easy one, the good one, the helper. This identity felt good initially. It made you special. But it also trapped you in a role where you could never be difficult, needy, or authentic without losing your special status. You became addicted to being the good one, even as the cost of maintaining that identity grew. Shame-based parenting creates people-pleasing. If you were frequently shamed for your needs, emotions, or authentic expressions, you learn that who you are is fundamentally flawed. The only way to be acceptable was to hide your authentic self and perform an acceptable self. You became a shapeshifter, molding yourself to whatever would minimize shame and gain approval. This constant performing to avoid shame becomes so automatic that you forget there is an authentic self beneath the performance. Cultural and religious conditioning also contribute. Many cultures and religions teach that selflessness is virtue and self-care is selfishness, that good people sacrifice for others, that putting yourself first is moral failure. These messages, internalized from childhood, create enormous guilt around honoring your own needs. You literally believe it is wrong, selfish, bad to consider yourself, so you compulsively please others while abandoning yourself, believing this is what good people do. Gender socialization plays a role, particularly for women. Girls are often taught to be nice, accommodating, nurturing, not too much, not too demanding. They are praised for being easy and criticized for being difficult. Boys can be more demanding and self-focused with less social punishment. Women who were thoroughly socialized into traditional femininity often develop people-pleasing as core identity because it was literally what they were trained to do from birth. School experiences reinforce the pattern. Maybe you learned that being the teacher's favorite required being helpful, agreeable, easy. Maybe you avoided bullying by being nice to everyone. Maybe you gained social acceptance through being useful. Each environment that rewarded people-pleasing strengthened the pattern and the belief that this is how you gain value and belonging. Understanding your origins does not excuse your current behavior, but it does explain it and create compassion. You did not choose to become a people pleaser. It was an adaptation to circumstances beyond your control. A child's response to an environment where people-pleasing was rewarded or required for safety, love, or belonging. That child did the best they could with the resources available. But you are not that child anymore. You are an adult with agency and choice. The adaptation that protected you then now imprisons you. And you have the power to make different choices, even though doing so feels terrifying because it contradicts everything you learned about how to be safe and loved in the world. Healing requires acknowledging the childhood origins while taking responsibility for adult change. Your past explains your pattern, but does not determine your future. You can honor the child who learned to please for survival while consciously choosing different behavior as an adult who no longer needs that survival strategy. This is the beginning of recovery from the disease to please. Chapter 3. The relationships that feed your disease. People-pleasing does not exist in isolation. It exists within a web of relationships that either challenge the pattern or enable it. Understanding which relationships feed your disease helps you see why change is so difficult and what must shift relationally for recovery to happen. The first type of enabling relationship is with takers. These are people who have no problem taking everything you offer and demanding more. They might be narcissists, users, or simply people who learn that you are an unlimited resource. These relationships are fundamentally one-sided. You give constantly. They take constantly. The relationship only functions because you never say no, and they never feel guilty about asking. These people benefit enormously from your disease and will actively resist your recovery because healthy boundaries threaten their access to your unlimited service. Takers often frame your people-pleasing as your greatest quality. You are so kind, so helpful, so generous. They praise the very behavior that is destroying you because they benefit from it. When you start setting boundaries, they react with anger, guilt-tripping, or accusations of selfishness. You are changing. You are not yourself. You are being mean. These reactions reveal that they valued what you provided, not who you are. Losing these relationships feels devastating, but these were never real relationships. They were transactions disguised as connections. The second type is conditional relationships, where approval depends on continued performance. These might be parents who only show pride when you achieve, friends who only stay close when you are useful, partners who only express affection when you accommodate. Love and connection in these relationships are explicitly or implicitly contingent on your people-pleasing. If you stop performing, approval withdraws. These relationships feed your disease by constantly reinforcing that your worth is conditional on service. The third type is competitive relationships, where others are measuring their value against yours. Maybe a sibling who feels inferior, resents when you succeed or change. Maybe a friend who bonds with you over shared struggle, feels threatened when you start healing. Maybe colleagues who also people-please feel judged by your boundary setting. These people have a vested interest in your staying sick because your sickness makes them feel better about their own. Your recovery threatens their sense of self or their excuse for not changing. The fourth type is dependent relationships, where people have become genuinely reliant on your overfunctioning. Maybe elderly parents who depend on your care. Maybe children used to unlimited availability. Maybe friends who use you as unpaid therapist. These people might genuinely care about you, but they have adapted to your boundaryless giving and will struggle when you start setting limits. Their dependence is real, which makes your boundary setting feel cruel even when it is necessary. The fifth type is mutual people-pleasing relationships. Both people are pleasers, so no one asks for what they need, no one sets boundaries, and both are performing for each other's approval. These relationships feel safe because no one is demanding, but they are empty because no one is real. You are two people pleasers relating performance to performance, never person to person. These relationships often feel supportive because neither person threatens the other with demands, but they prevent growth because both are enabling each other's disease. The sixth type is relationships based on your performed self rather than your authentic self. These people know you as the helpful, agreeable, accommodating version. They have never met your authentic self because you have never shown them. When you start being more real, expressing needs, setting boundaries, they are confused. This is not you. What happened to the real you? But the version they knew was not the real you. It was your people-pleasing performance. These relationships must either evolve to accommodate your authentic self, or they will end because they were based on a person who no longer exists. Understanding these relationship dynamics reveals why recovery from people-pleasing is so difficult. Your entire relationship system is organized around your disease. People benefit from it. They expect it. They resist when you change. Some relationships are so fundamentally based on your self-abandonment that they cannot survive your recovery. This is painful, but necessary information. Relationships that require your self-betrayal are not relationships worth keeping. As you recover, you will lose some relationships. This is not failure. This is pruning. You are removing connections that were based on your disease rather than your personhood. The people who leave when you start honoring yourself reveal that they valued your service, not your soul. Let them go. Make space for relationships based on mutual respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. Some relationships will evolve. People who genuinely care about you will adjust when you set boundaries. They might be initially confused or resistant, but they will adapt because they value you, not just what you provide. These relationships deepen through your authenticity. They become more real, more satisfying, more sustainable because they are based on truth rather than performance. New relationships will form as you recover. As you become more authentic, you attract different people. People who respect boundaries because they have boundaries. People who value authenticity because they are authentic. People who do not need you to be a certain way because they are secure in themselves. These relationships feel different. They feel nourishing rather than draining. They create energy rather than consuming it. They support your authentic self rather than requiring your performed self. The relational dimension of recovery is crucial. You cannot heal people-pleasing while maintaining all the relationships that depend on it. Your relationship system must reorganize around health rather than disease. This means some difficult conversations, some boundary setting, some endings, and some beginnings. It means tolerating others' discomfort with your changes. It means prioritizing your healing over their convenience. This is not selfish. This is survival. Your soul depends on it. Chapter 4. The exhaustion of perpetual performance. One of the most devastating consequences of the disease to please is the profound exhaustion it creates. People-pleasing is not a sustainable way to live. It burns you out physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Understanding the mechanisms of this exhaustion helps you recognize the true cost of your disease. Physical exhaustion comes from chronic stress. Your nervous system is constantly activated in hypervigilance mode, scanning for threats to approval. This chronic activation floods your body with stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline that are meant for short-term danger response. But in people pleasers, this stress response runs constantly. The cumulative effect is devastating. Disrupted sleep, weakened immune system, digestive problems, chronic pain, headaches. The physical symptoms of people-pleasing are real and measurable. Your body is also exhausted from the constant tension of self-suppression. You are perpetually holding back authentic expression, authentic emotion, authentic needs. This holding requires muscular tension. People pleasers often have chronic neck, shoulder, and back tension from literally carrying the weight of everyone else's needs while suppressing their own. The body keeps the score. Your muscles remember every no you did not say, every boundary you did not set, every authentic expression you suppressed. Emotional exhaustion comes from perpetual emotional labor. You are constantly managing not just your own emotions, but everyone else's. Soothing others, absorbing tension, smoothing conflict, maintaining pleasant demeanor regardless of how you actually feel. This is exhausting work that is invisible and uncompensated. You are performing emotional labor in every relationship, including relationships that should provide rest and nourishment. You never get to be the one being cared for, because you are always the one doing the caring. The emotional exhaustion is amplified by suppressed emotions. All the anger at being taken for granted, all the resentment at lack of reciprocity, all the hurt at being undervalued, all the frustration at not being seen. These emotions do not disappear when suppressed. They accumulate internally, creating pressure, tension, and eventually eruption. The emotional energy required to suppress your actual feelings while performing acceptable feelings is enormous and unsustainable. Mental exhaustion comes from the constant cognitive load of people-pleasing. You are always thinking about others. What do they need? What do they want? How are they feeling? What should I do to help? This mental real estate, devoted to others, leaves little capacity for your own thoughts, dreams, interests, or needs. Your mind is colonized by concerns about everyone else, leaving no room for yourself. This mental exhaustion manifests as brain fog, difficulty concentrating, inability to make decisions, and sense of mental overwhelm. The mental load also includes maintaining the performance, remembering what you told each person, managing the different versions of yourself you present to different audiences, keeping track of all your obligations and commitments. This is like running multiple operating systems simultaneously. It takes enormous processing power and leads to frequent crashes. Spiritual exhaustion is perhaps the most profound. Your soul is exhausted from the constant betrayal of self-abandonment. Every time you choose others' comfort over your truth, you fragment yourself a little more. Every time you perform, instead of being authentic, you lose connection with your essential self. This spiritual exhaustion manifests as emptiness, meaninglessness, sense of being lost, disconnection from purpose, feeling like you are sleepwalking through life. You are exhausted at the soul level from living a life that is not yours. The exhaustion is also cumulative. Each day of people-pleasing adds to the exhaustion account. each self-betrayal increases the debt. This is why people pleasers often hit a breaking point where they simply cannot continue. The exhaustion becomes so total that the disease cannot be sustained. This breaking point can be health crisis, nervous breakdown, depression, or simply complete inability to keep performing. The breaking point, while terrifying, is often the catalyst for change because it forces recognition that the current path is unsustainable. The exhaustion also creates vulnerability to other problems. Chronic exhaustion leads to poor self-care. You are too tired to eat well, exercise, maintain health, pursue interests. This creates a downward spiral where exhaustion leads to worse health, which creates more exhaustion. The exhaustion also impairs decision-making and makes you more vulnerable to manipulation because you do not have the energy to fight or resist. Many people pleasers medicate their exhaustion with substances, food, shopping, social media, or other compulsions. These attempts to numb or escape the exhaustion create additional problems while never addressing the root cause. The exhaustion will continue until the people-pleasing stops. No amount of self-care can compensate for the exhaustion created by chronic self-abandonment. Understanding the exhaustion helps you see that people-pleasing is not sustainable. You cannot keep living this way. The exhaustion will either force you to change or it will break you. Recognizing this creates urgency around recovery. This is not about wanting to be less nice or less helpful. This is about survival. Your body, emotions, mind, and soul are telling you through exhaustion that you must change. Listening to this message and taking it seriously is the beginning of honoring yourself in a way you have never done before. Recovery from people-pleasing includes recovery from exhaustion. As you set boundaries, reduce overfunctioning, and stop performing, your nervous system begins to regulate. Your body begins to rest. Your emotions begin to process. Your mind begins to clear. Your soul begins to return. The exhaustion lifts gradually as you stop doing the behaviors that create it. This recovery is not instant, but it is real. And the energy that returns is the energy of your authentic self, emerging from beneath the weight of perpetual performance. Chapter 5. The resentment you cannot express. One of the most toxic aspects of the disease to please is the resentment that builds inevitably when you chronically give beyond your capacity and receive little in return. Yet people pleasers cannot express this resentment without risking the disapproval they fear most. This creates a pressure cooker dynamic that poisons relationships and internal experience. Resentment is the feeling that arises when you give, but your giving is not appreciated, reciprocated, or respected. When you sacrifice, but your sacrifice goes unnoticed. When you accommodate, but your accommodation is taken for granted. When you help, but your help is expected rather than valued. Resentment says, I gave too much and received too little, and that is not fair. This feeling is completely valid. The problem is not the resentment. The problem is that as a people pleaser, you created the conditions that guarantee resentment. You gave without being asked. You said yes when you wanted to say no. You accommodated when you should have set boundaries. You took responsibility for things that were not yours to manage. Then you resented that others did not appreciate sacrifices they never requested, did not reciprocate giving they did not realize was burdensome, and did not respect boundaries you never communicated. You created the entire dynamic through your people-pleasing and then blamed others for the consequences. This is not to say others are blameless. Some people absolutely take advantage of people pleasers. They exploit your inability to say no. They demand without reciprocating. They treat you as an unlimited resource. These people are using you, but they can only use you because you allow it. Your lack of boundaries makes exploitation possible. Taking responsibility for your role does not excuse their behavior. It empowers you to change the dynamic rather than remaining a victim of it. The resentment builds because your giving is not clean. Clean giving is when you give freely from genuine desire with no expectation of return. People pleasers almost never give cleanly. Your giving comes with unspoken expectations. You expect appreciation, reciprocity, loyalty, priority. But because these expectations are unspoken, others do not know they exist. When they inevitably fail to meet expectations they do not know about, you feel resentful. But the unfairness is not their failure to meet your unspoken expectations. The unfairness is your failure to communicate those expectations honestly. The resentment is also about loss of self. You resent that others seem comfortable asking for help while you cannot. That they seem fine saying no while you cannot. That they seem to prioritize themselves while you cannot. You resent their freedom to be selfish because you do not give yourself that same freedom. This resentment is actually envy dressed up as moral superiority. You tell yourself they are selfish and you are not. But what you really feel is that they get to honor themselves and you do not. The resentment is not really about them. It is about your own self-abandonment. The resentment creates bitterness over time. You become cynical about relationships, convinced that people only want you for what you provide. This might feel like wisdom, but it is actually projection. You only value yourself for what you provide, so you assume others do too. You have commodified yourself through your people-pleasing, reducing your worth to your utility. Then you resent that others treat you like a commodity when you train them to do exactly that. The resentment leaks out in indirect ways because you cannot express it directly without risking disapproval. You might become passive-aggressive, agreeing to help but doing it poorly or with attitude. You might become martyr-like, constantly referencing your sacrifices to guilt others. You might withdraw emotionally while continuing to perform physically, giving service but withholding presence. You might complain to third parties about the people you cannot confront directly. These indirect expressions poison relationships without actually addressing the problem. The resentment also turns inward as shame. You feel guilty for your resentment because you believe you should not feel that way. You are supposed to be generous, selfless, willing. Feeling resentment makes you feel like a bad person. So you shame yourself for the resentment, which does not make it go away, but adds shame on top of resentment. Now you feel resentful and ashamed of your resentment, doubling your suffering. Breaking the resentment cycle requires addressing its roots. First, stop giving beyond your capacity. Give only what you can give, genuinely and freely. Say no when you need to. Set boundaries that protect your resources. This immediately reduces the conditions that create resentment because you are no longer overgiving. Second, make your giving clean. If you choose to give, do it without expectation of return. If you cannot give without expectation, do not give. Do not perform generous acts and then secretly expect reciprocity. Either give freely or do not give at all. This honesty eliminates the setup for resentment. Third, communicate your needs and expectations directly. If you need reciprocity, ask for it. If you want appreciation, say so. If you expect something in return, make that explicit before giving. Others cannot meet expectations they do not know exist. Honest communication creates the possibility for genuine reciprocity rather than the resentment of unmet, unspoken expectations. Fourth, take responsibility for your role in creating dynamics. You train people how to treat you through your people-pleasing. They learn that your needs do not matter because you act like they do not. They learned that they can take without reciprocating because you never require reciprocity. They learned that you are an unlimited resource because you never set limits. Taking responsibility empowers you to retrain them through new behavior rather than resenting them for responding to your training. Fifth, address resentment toward yourself. You are not resentful because others are taking advantage. You are resentful because you are taking advantage of yourself. You are abandoning yourself repeatedly and then angry that others do not value you the way you do not value yourself. The resentment towards self must be transformed into commitment to self-honoring. Instead of resenting your lack of boundaries, set boundaries. Instead of resenting your inability to say no, practice saying no. Your resentment is information about where you need to change, not evidence that others need to change. Finally, express resentment constructively, not through passive aggression or martyrdom, but through honest conversation. I have been overgiving and feeling resentful. I need to set better boundaries going forward. This might not be well received, but it is honest. And honest communication, even when uncomfortable, is healthier than suppressed resentment poisoning the relationship invisibly. The resentment is a symptom of your disease to please. Healing the disease will heal the resentment. As you stop overgiving, set boundaries, and honor yourself, the conditions that create resentment dissolve. You will still give to others, but from genuine desire rather than compulsion. You will still help, but within your capacity rather than beyond it. You will still be kind, but to yourself as well as others. And giving from this place creates satisfaction rather than resentment, because it is chosen rather than compelled. Chapter 6. The Identity Crisis of Recovery. When you begin recovering from the disease to please, you face an identity crisis. Your entire sense of self has been built on being the helpful one, the nice one, the person everyone can count on. When you start setting boundaries and honoring yourself, you threaten this identity. Who are you if not the helper? What is your value if not your service? This chapter explores the identity dimensions of recovery and how to rebuild identity based on authentic self rather than function for others. The people-pleasing identity feels stable and valuable. People praise you for it. They express gratitude. They tell you how wonderful you are. This praise reinforces the identity and makes it difficult to release, because releasing it feels like losing yourself and your value. But this identity is a prison. It keeps you trapped in behavior that harms you. It prevents you from discovering who you actually are beneath the performance. The stability is the stability of a prison cell. Safe, but suffocating. The identity is also exhausting to maintain. You must constantly perform to prove you are still the helpful one. Any moment you are not helping threatens the identity. Any boundary you set contradicts who you think you are. You are trapped on a treadmill of perpetual proving, never able to rest because resting would mean losing your identity. This creates chronic pressure to maintain performance regardless of cost to yourself. The people-pleasing identity also prevents authentic relationships. People relate to your role, not your person. They know you as the helper, not as a full human with needs, desires, flaws, and complexity. You become one-dimensional, defined entirely by your function. This is dehumanizing. You deserve to be known as a person, not just as a service provider. But as long as your identity is wrapped up in helping, you cannot show your full humanity without threatening who you think you are. Recovery requires identity death. The helpful, accommodating, people-pleasing version of you must die for your authentic self to emerge. This death feels terrifying because you do not know who you are without the performed identity. You have been performing so long that you lost touch with your authentic self. Recovery means facing the unknown of who you are when you are not constantly helping everyone else. The identity crisis includes shame. You believe that not helping makes you selfish, mean, bad. Setting boundaries makes you difficult. Honoring your needs makes you demanding. These beliefs create shame around the very behaviors required for recovery. You feel like a bad person for doing what is actually healthy. This shame must be challenged through recognizing that these beliefs are part of the disease, not truth about reality. Health includes boundaries, self-care, and honoring needs. These are not selfish. They are necessary. The crisis also includes grief. You grieve the loss of the identity you have held, the person everyone could count on, the one who never said no, the helper who made everyone's life easier. This identity felt valuable even though it was destroying you. Releasing it creates loss, even though the loss is actually liberation. Allow the grief without getting stuck in it. You are not losing something real. You are losing a false identity that was never authentically you. Rebuilding identity requires discovering who you are beyond helping. What are your interests independent of others' needs? What are your authentic preferences? What do you value? What are your genuine strengths beyond the helping you have performed? These questions can feel impossible to answer because you have spent so long focused on others that you lost yourself. But the answers are there, buried beneath the performance. Recovery is an archaeological process, excavating your authentic self from beneath layers of conditioning. Start with small explorations. Try things without the pressure of being good at them, or them being useful to others. Notice what genuinely interests you when you are not trying to be helpful. Pay attention to how you feel. What energizes you? What drains you when you are alone with yourself? Your authentic preferences will emerge gradually as you create space away from perpetual other focus. Build identity based on your intrinsic qualities rather than your function. You are not just what you do for others. You are your values, your character, your unique way of being in the world. Maybe you are creative, curious, thoughtful, strong. These qualities exist independent of whether you are helping anyone. They are who you are, not what you provide. Identifying and valuing these intrinsic qualities creates identity stability that does not depend on others' needs or your performance. Practice being rather than doing. People pleasers are addicted to doing because doing is how they earn worth. But worthiness is about being, not doing. Practice just being present without an agenda to help, fix, or serve. This is profoundly uncomfortable initially because it contradicts everything you have learned about how to be valuable. But sitting with this discomfort helps you realize that you exist and have value even when you are not doing anything for anyone. Expect others to be confused by the new you. They knew you as the helper. When you start honoring yourself, they might question whether you are okay, whether something is wrong, whether you have changed. You have changed. That is the point. Not all change will be celebrated. Some people preferred the old you because the old you served them without boundaries. Their confusion or disapproval is not evidence you are wrong. It is evidence that you are disrupting a dynamic they benefited from. Understand that the new identity will feel fake initially. You have been the people pleaser for so long that it feels like your true self. Honoring yourself, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your needs will feel fake, unnatural, wrong. This is normal. Any new pattern feels fake before it becomes natural. You are not becoming fake. You are becoming authentic. But authentic feels fake when you have been performing for decades. Trust that the discomfort is temporary and that the new patterns will integrate over time. Celebrate your evolving identity. Notice when you set a boundary. Acknowledge when you honor a need. Recognize when you choose yourself. These moments of new identity deserve celebration because they represent profound change. You are becoming someone new. Someone who values themselves as much as others. Someone who can say no. Someone who has needs and honors them. This is not selfishness. This is wholeness. This is becoming a real person rather than a performing function. The identity crisis is not a problem to solve quickly. It is a transition to move through over time. Be patient with yourself. Be curious about who you are discovering. Be compassionate with the grief, fear, and uncertainty. On the other side of the identity crisis is a self that is authentic, grounded, and genuinely valuable, not because of what you provide, but because of who you are. This self was always there. You are just finally letting it emerge from beneath the performance. Chapter 7. Setting boundaries that stick. The single most important skill for recovering from the disease to please is boundary setting. But people pleasers struggle enormously with boundaries because setting them contradicts everything you have learned about how to gain love and avoid rejection. This chapter provides a comprehensive framework for setting boundaries that actually stick, rather than boundaries you set but cannot maintain. Understanding what boundaries are is the first step. Boundaries are not walls. They are not punishments. They are not manipulations to get others to change. Boundaries are guidelines that teach others how to treat you and protect your resources, time, energy, well-being from being drained, violated, or disrespected. Boundaries say, this is what I am available for, and this is what I am not available for. They create structure in relationships that allows healthy interaction. People pleasers either have no boundaries or have boundaries they cannot maintain. You might know intellectually that you should say no, but when the moment comes, you say yes. You might want to set limits, but when confronted with potential disapproval, you back down. This pattern stems from the core belief that boundaries equal selfishness and that others' comfort matters more than your well-being. These beliefs must be challenged before boundaries can stick. Start with boundary identification. What boundaries do you actually need? Where are you being violated, drained, or disrespected? Be specific. I need boundaries around my time after work. I need boundaries around being asked to help others with their responsibilities. I need boundaries around being told I am too sensitive. Identifying specific needs helps you set specific boundaries rather than vague intentions that are impossible to implement. Prepare boundary scripts. People pleasers often fail at boundaries because they improvise in the moment and default to old patterns under pressure. Having prepared language makes boundaries more likely to stick. I am not available after 9 p.m. That does not work for me. I cannot take that on right now. Those are complete sentences that do not require explanation, though you can add brief context if you choose. Practice saying these out loud until they feel more natural. Expect pushback and plan for it. When you start setting boundaries, people will push back, especially people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They might guilt trip, express disappointment, get angry, or accuse you of being selfish. This pushback is predictable. Plan how you will respond before it happens. I understand you are disappointed, and my boundary stands. Your reaction to my boundary is your responsibility, not mine. Having responses prepared prevents you from caving to pressure in the moment. Start with low-stakes practice. Do not start boundary setting with your most difficult relationship. Start with strangers, acquaintances, or less significant relationships. Decline the invitation from someone you barely know. Say no to the extra task from a colleague. These small practices build your boundary muscle in situations where the stakes are lower. Success in low-stakes situations builds confidence for higher-stakes boundaries. Tolerate the guilt that arises. When you set boundaries, you will feel guilty. This guilt is conditioned response, not moral guidance. You have been trained to feel guilty when you do not please others. The guilt does not mean your boundary is wrong. It means you are challenging an old pattern. Practice sitting with guilt without immediately trying to relieve it by removing the boundary. The guilt will decrease over time as you prove to yourself repeatedly that setting boundaries does not lead to catastrophe. Do not explain or justify excessively. People pleasers tend to over-explain boundaries, providing extensive justification to prove the boundary is legitimate. This signals that your boundary is negotiable. You do not need others to agree your boundary is valid. You are allowed to set boundaries simply because you want to. Brief context is fine. Extensive justification opens negotiation and weakens the boundary. Maintain boundaries consistently. Setting a boundary once, then abandoning it the next time teaches others that your boundaries are not real. If you say you are not available after 9 p.m., maintain that boundary every time, not just when convenient. Consistency is crucial for boundaries to be taken seriously by others and internalized by you. Expect relationship shifts. Some relationships will adapt to your boundaries. Others will end. The relationships that end reveal they were based on your boundarylessness rather than genuine care for you. This is painful, but essential information. Let those relationships go. They were harming you. Holding on to them requires abandoning yourself, which is too high a price. Use consequences to reinforce boundaries. Boundaries without consequences are requests. If someone repeatedly violates your boundary, there must be consequences. This might mean reducing contact, ending the interaction, or in serious cases, ending the relationship. I have asked you not to call after 9 p.m. If you call after 9 p.m., I will not answer. Then follow through. Consequences teach that your boundaries are real and will be enforced. Self-validate your boundaries. You will not always get external validation that your boundaries are reasonable. Others might call you selfish, difficult, or mean. Their opinion does not determine whether your boundary is valid. You validate your boundary by recognizing that your needs matter, your resources are limited, and you have the right to protect yourself. Internal validation is more important than external validation for boundary maintenance. Recognize boundary violations early. People pleasers often do not realize a boundary has been crossed until resentment has built. Develop sensitivity to when your boundaries are being pushed or violated. Notice the feeling of discomfort, the sense that something is off, the internal no, even when your mouth says yes. These signals indicate boundary violation. Catching violations early makes them easier to address. Reframe boundaries as self-respect. You are not being mean when you set boundaries. You are respecting yourself enough to protect your well-being. You are teaching others that you matter. Your time matters. Your energy matters. This is not selfishness. This is basic self-care and self-respect. The reframe helps reduce guilt and strengthens your commitment to boundaries. Boundaries are not one-time events. They are ongoing practice. You will set boundaries, maintain them, adjust them as needed, and continue practicing throughout recovery and beyond. Boundaries do not become effortless immediately, but they do become easier with practice. Each boundary set strengthens your capacity for the next. Each time you maintain a boundary despite pushback, you prove to yourself that you can. Over time, boundaries shift from terrifying exception to normal practice. This transformation is the foundation of recovery from the disease to please. Chapter 8. The Healing Power of No. The word no is perhaps the most powerful two-letter word in your recovery from people-pleasing. Yet it is also the word you have the most difficulty saying. This chapter explores why no is so difficult for people-pleasers, why it is essential for healing, and how to develop your capacity to say no skillfully and consistently. For people-pleasers, no feels impossible. It feels mean, selfish, cruel. It feels like rejection of the person rather than declining the request. You have conflated no to a request with no to a relationship. So saying no feels like ending connection, risking abandonment, being a bad person. These feelings are so intense that you say yes to avoid them, even when yes harms you. This equation of no with badness comes from your history. Maybe saying no as a child resulted in punishment, guilt-tripping, or withdrawal of love. Maybe you were taught that no is rude, selfish, or disrespectful. Maybe you learned that accommodating others is how you earn worth. These lessons created the belief that no is dangerous and yes is how you stay safe and loved. But this belief traps you in chronic self-betrayal because you cannot honor yourself while always saying yes to others. The inability to say no creates a life where others' preferences, needs, and agendas determine your time, energy, and direction. You are living reactively, responding to whoever asks rather than proactively choosing based on your priorities. Your life is shaped by others' requests rather than your own desires. This is not a life. This is servitude, disguised as helpfulness. The healing power of no comes from reclaiming agency over your life. Every no to a request is a yes to yourself. No to the obligation that drains you is yes to the rest you need. No to the commitment that does not align with your priorities is yes to what actually matters to you. No to the demand on your time is yes to your own goals. This reframe helps you see no as positive rather than negative. You are not rejecting others. You are choosing yourself. Learning to say no starts with recognizing that no is a complete sentence. You do not need to justify, explain, or defend your no. You do not need others to agree your no is valid. You simply decline. No, I cannot do that. No, that does not work for me. These are complete responses. The discomfort you feel saying them without explanation is not a sign you should add more. It is the discomfort of breaking an old pattern. That said, you can include brief context if you choose, but keep it simple. I have other commitments. I do not have capacity right now. I need to focus on my priorities. These brief explanations provide context without opening negotiation. When you over-explain, you signal that your no is weak and can be challenged. When you explain briefly and stop, you signal that your no is final. Practice the pause before responding. When someone makes a request, your automatic response is yes. To break this pattern, insert a pause. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. I need to think about that. This pause gives you time to feel into whether you actually want to say yes, rather than automatically agreeing out of habit. If your gut reaction during the pause is dread or resentment, that is your answer. No. Distinguish between requests and demands. A request leaves you free to decline. A demand expects compliance. Many people pleasers treat all requests as demands, feeling obligated to say yes regardless of their capacity. But requests are just invitations. You are allowed to decline invitations. Practice hearing requests as optional rather than mandatory. Would you be willing to versus you need to? Even if the other person presents it as demand, you can respond as if it were request. Address the fear that saying no means people will not like you. This fear is often true for some people. Some people will not like you if you stop saying yes to everything. But were they actually liking you? Or were they liking what you provided? People who only like you when you serve them do not actually like you. They like your service. Losing their approval is not losing anything real. It is exposing a transactional relationship for what it was. People who genuinely care about you will adjust to your no's. They might be initially surprised because yes has been your default, but they will respect your boundaries once they understand you are serious. These relationships often improve through your no's because they shift from one-sided taking to more balanced reciprocity. Develop standard phrases for different no situations. No to social invitations. That sounds fun, but I need to pass this time. No to work requests beyond your job. That is outside my current scope. No to family demands. I am not available for that. No to friends' expectations. I cannot do that right now. Having these phrases prepared makes saying no more automatic and less stressful. Say no early rather than yes, followed by resentful cancellation. People pleasers often say yes in the moment to avoid discomfort, then cancel later or show up resentfully. This is worse than saying no initially. It creates more conflict and teaches others that your yes is unreliable. Better to say no up front, even though it is uncomfortable, than to say, yes, you do not mean. Remember that saying no to some things allows you to say yes to what matters. Your time and energy are finite. Every yes to something is a no to something else. When you say yes to the obligation you did not want, you are saying no to rest, creative projects, meaningful relationships, or your own priorities. Strategic no allows you to protect resources for what genuinely matters to you. Practice saying no to small things to build your no capacity. Decline the sample at the store. Say no to the extra side dish. Turn down the invitation to an event you are not interested in. These tiny no's while seemingly insignificant, builds your comfort with the word and the act. Each small no strengthens your no muscle for bigger situations. Reframe no as honesty rather than meanness. When you say yes, but mean no, you are lying. When you say no, you are telling the truth. Which is more respectful? Lying to keep others comfortable, or being honest, even though they might be disappointed? Honesty is respect. Lying to avoid conflict is actually disrespectful because it treats others as too fragile to handle truth. The healing power of no is transformative. As you develop capacity to say no, you reclaim your life from the demands and expectations of others. You create space for your authentic desires, needs, and priorities. You stop being controlled by whoever asks and start directing your life according to your values. You shift from reactive living to intentional living. This is not about becoming unhelpful or unkind. This is about being selective with your yes, so that when you do say yes, it is genuine, enthusiastic, and from capacity rather than compulsion. Your no's make your yeses meaningful, and your ability to say no is your ability to choose yourself, which is the foundation of recovery from the disease to please. Chapter 9. The Long Road to Recovery. Recovery from the disease to please is not quick or easy. Understanding the realistic timeline and phases of recovery helps you stay committed through the difficult parts rather than expecting instant transformation and giving up when it does not happen. The first phase is awareness, typically lasting weeks to a few months. This is when you first recognize that your people-pleasing is a problem, not a virtue. You start seeing the patterns, costs, and origins. This phase is destabilizing because you cannot go back to unconscious pleasing, but you have not yet developed healthier patterns. You know something is wrong, but do not know how to fix it. This liminal space is uncomfortable but necessary. The second phase is experimentation, typically lasting several months. This is when you start trying new behaviors, setting small boundaries, saying no in low-stakes situations, expressing needs tentatively. These experiments often fail initially because you are working against decades of conditioning. You might set a boundary, then immediately rescind it when someone pushes back. You might say no, then feel so guilty you change it to yes. These failures are not evidence you cannot change. They are normal parts of the learning process. Each experiment provides information about what works and what triggers your old patterns. The third phase is friction, typically lasting a year or more. This is when you are setting boundaries more consistently, but encountering significant pushback from people who preferred you, boundaryless. Relationships strain or end. People accuse you of changing. You face guilt, shame, and doubt about whether recovery is worth it. This phase is the hardest because you are in the messy middle. You have left the familiar misery of people-pleasing, but have not yet reached the stability of recovered patterns. Many people quit here because it is so uncomfortable, but pushing through this friction is essential for reaching the other side. The fourth phase is integration, typically lasting a year or more. This is when new patterns start feeling more natural. Saying no is still not effortless, but it is not agonizing. Setting boundaries still creates discomfort, but not panic. Honoring your needs still requires effort, but not constant conscious thought. Your relationships have reorganized around your new patterns. The people who could not adapt have left. The people who could adapt have adjusted. New relationships have formed with people who know the real you from the start. The fifth phase is embodiment, ongoing. This is when recovery becomes your new normal. You do not have to consciously think about setting boundaries most of the time. You naturally say no when something does not work for you. You automatically honor your needs without extensive internal debate. You cannot imagine going back to chronic people-pleasing because it feels so foreign to who you have become. This does not mean you are perfect at boundaries or never slip into old patterns under stress. It means your default has shifted from pleasing to self-honoring. This timeline totals roughly 3 to 5 years from first recognizing people-pleasing as problem to fully embodying recovered patterns. Some people move faster, some slower, depending on their history, support systems, and commitment. But expecting transformation in months sets unrealistic expectations that lead to giving up prematurely. Understanding the timeline helps you persist through difficulty. When you are 6 months in and still struggling to maintain boundaries, you are not failing. You are on schedule. When you are 2 years in and relationships are ending because of your changes, you are not doing it wrong. You are in the normal friction phase. Knowing where you are in the process reduces the tendency to interpret challenges as failure. The timeline also helps manage others' expectations. When people ask why you are changing, you can explain, this is a multi-year transformation process. This helps them understand you are serious about recovery and gives them time to adjust rather than expecting them to adapt immediately. The recovery timeline includes recognizing that different areas shift at different rates. You might get good at saying no in professional settings while still struggling with family. You might set boundaries around time, but still struggle with emotional boundaries. This uneven progress is normal. You are not transforming into a boundary expert all at once. You are gradually developing capacity across multiple domains. Also, understand that recovery is not linear. You will have good weeks followed by difficult weeks. You will set boundaries successfully, then slip into old patterns under stress. You will experience progress, then regression. This is normal. The overall trend is what matters, not day-to-day fluctuations. 2 steps forward, 1 step back is still net progress. The timeline requires consistent commitment. If you recognize people-pleasing, then do nothing about it. Recovery will not happen. If you start setting boundaries, then quit when it gets uncomfortable. You stay stuck. The timeline assumes sustained effort across all phases. This does not mean perfect execution. It means showing up repeatedly, even imperfectly, to practice new patterns and challenge old beliefs. Recovery also includes regular evaluation and adjustment. Every few months, assess your progress. Where have you grown? Where are you still struggling? What needs more attention? This evaluation helps you see progress you might otherwise miss and identifies areas needing focus. The evaluation also helps you celebrate progress rather than only noticing how far you still have to go. The years will pass, whether you recover or not. 3 years from now, you will either be living more authentically with healthier boundaries, or you will be 3 years deeper into people-pleasing with more exhaustion, resentment, and loss of self. The choice is not whether to invest time. The time will pass regardless. The choice is what you do with that time. Continued self-abandonment to avoid discomfort, or recovery toward authentic living despite discomfort? Starting now, even imperfectly, is always the right choice. Waiting for perfect conditions, complete clarity, or easier circumstances means you will never start. Conditions will not be perfect. You will not have complete clarity. Recovery will not be easy. But starting now means you are 3 years closer to recovery 3 years from now. The timeline is long, but living your entire life in the disease to please is longer. Begin the journey. Trust the process. Stay the course. Recovery is possible and worth every difficult step. Chapter 10. When recovery means leaving. Sometimes recovering from the disease to please requires ending relationships that fundamentally depend on your self-abandonment. This is one of the most painful aspects of recovery, but sometimes it is necessary for your survival. Understanding when leaving is required and how to do it with integrity is essential. The first sign a relationship might need ending is that it only functions if you betray yourself. You have communicated your needs and boundaries clearly. The other person refuses to adjust. The relationship continues only if you return to boundaryless pleasing. At this point, you must choose between the relationship and yourself. Choosing yourself sometimes means ending the relationship. This is particularly difficult when the relationship is with family. You might love them. They might not be intentionally harmful. But the relationship dynamic requires your self-abandonment. Family relationships come with enormous guilt around leaving or limiting contact. You have been taught that family is forever, that blood is thicker than water, that you must maintain connection regardless of cost. But these teachings often enable abusive or dysfunctional dynamics. Recovering sometimes requires limiting or ending contact with family members who cannot respect your boundaries or who actively sabotage your recovery. Romantic relationships built on your people-pleasing also sometimes need to end. If your partner fell in love with the version of you who never said no, always accommodated, and had no needs, they might not be able to adapt to the authentic you. When you start setting boundaries and honoring yourself, they might feel like you have changed, and they do not like the new you. In reality, you have stopped performing and started being real. If they cannot love the real you, the relationship cannot continue in healthy form. Friendships based on your utility rather than genuine connection often end during recovery. These friends valued what you provided, your constant availability, your willingness to help, your absorbing of their problems. When you stop being their unpaid therapist, constant helper, and endless resource, they have no interest in reciprocal friendship. Losing these friendships hurts, but they were not real friendships. They were one-sided dynamics where you were used. Signs a relationship needs ending include consistent boundary violations despite clear communication, manipulation, guilt-tripping, or punishment when you assert needs, refusal to take responsibility for their behavior, expectation that you exist to serve their needs, lack of any reciprocity or care for your well-being, relationships where you feel worse after interacting than before, dynamics where your growth is seen as threat rather than celebrated. Before ending a relationship, ensure you have communicated clearly. Many relationships can adapt if the other person understands what needs to change. Have explicit conversation about your boundaries, needs, and expectations. Give them opportunity to adjust. Some people genuinely did not realize their behavior was problematic and will change when you make it clear. But if you have communicated clearly and repeatedly, and nothing changes, you have done your part. Continuing to accept poor treatment is not loyalty. It is self-harm. When you decide to end a relationship, be clear and direct. Do not hint. Do not fade away passively. State your decision explicitly. I have decided to end this relationship, or I need to significantly reduce contact. You can provide brief explanation, but do not engage in extensive justification or debate. You are not asking permission. You are stating a decision. Their agreement is not required. Expect guilt and pressure. The other person might try to convince you to change your mind. They might promise to change. They might guilt trip, expressing how hurt they are. They might recruit others to pressure you. Stand firm. If they were going to change, they would have done so when you first communicated your needs. Promises to change now are usually attempts to get you to stay in the dynamic, not genuine commitment to different behavior. Ending relationships during recovery often triggers grief, guilt, and doubt. You grieve the loss of the relationship, even though it was harming you. You feel guilty for hurting the other person or letting them down. You doubt whether you made the right choice. These feelings are normal. Allow them without using them as reasons to return to the harmful relationship. Grief does not mean you made wrong choice. It means you cared about someone who could not meet you in healthy relationship. Some endings are temporary. You might need distance for a period while you strengthen your recovery. Later, when you are more established in healthier patterns, you might be able to reconnect with better boundaries. But some endings are permanent. Some relationships are so toxic that no amount of boundaries makes them healthy. These must be released completely. Ending relationships creates space. Space for relationships based on mutual respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. Space for people who appreciate your authentic self rather than your performed helpfulness. Space for connections that energize rather than drain you. The space feels empty initially, but it is necessary emptiness that makes room for better. Not every relationship that challenges you needs to end. Healthy relationships include conflict, disappointment, and need to work through differences. The question is whether the other person is willing to meet you, adjust, grow, take responsibility. If they are, the relationship can evolve. If they are not, the relationship needs to end or be radically limited. Leaving relationships that require your self-abandonment is not selfish. It is survival. You cannot recover while maintaining dynamics that depend on your disease. Some relationships must end for your soul to live. This is tragic but true. Choosing yourself over harmful relationships is the ultimate act of self-love. It says, I matter enough to not accept treatment that harms me. It says, my well-being is more important than maintaining connection with people who require my self-betrayal. This choice is painful, but essential. Your recovery, your soul, your life depend on it. Chapter 11. Building relationships based on authenticity. As you recover from people-pleasing, you must learn to build new relationships based on authenticity rather than accommodation. This is unfamiliar territory because you have never experienced relationships where you are fully yourself. This chapter provides guidance for creating healthy connections that do not require self-abandonment. Authentic relationships start with showing up as yourself from the beginning. Do not perform to attract people, then hope to slowly reveal your authentic self over time. This strategy fails because people fell for the performance, not the reality. When the performance drops, they feel bait and switched. Show up authentically from the first interaction. This means some people will not be interested. That is good. You want people attracted to your actual self, not your performed self. Authentic showing up includes expressing your real opinions, preferences, and boundaries from the start. If you do not like something, say so. If you have a boundary, communicate it early. If you disagree, express it respectfully. This honesty might feel risky because you have been trained to be agreeable to be liked. But agreeableness creates surface connections that are not sustainable. Authenticity creates the possibility for genuine depth. Reciprocity is the foundation of healthy relationships. Both people give and receive relatively equally over time. Not perfect equality in every interaction, but general balance. If you are always giving and they are always taking, it is not a healthy relationship. If they are always initiating and you are always responding, evaluate whether this feels balanced. Authentic relationships involve mutual investment, care, and effort. Practice asking for what you need. People pleasers are trained to anticipate and meet others' needs while never expressing their own. In authentic relationships, both people express needs, and both people work to meet those needs within reasonable capacity. You might need emotional support sometimes, practical help sometimes, space sometimes. Express these needs directly, rather than hinting or expecting others to mind read. Direct expression of needs is honesty, not burden. Tolerate conflict without immediately accommodating to restore peace. Healthy relationships include disagreement, disappointment, and working through differences. People pleasers tend to immediately fold in conflict, accommodating to relieve tension. But conflict resolution requires both people adjusting, not just you abandoning your position. Practice staying in discomfort of disagreement without immediately people-pleasing to make it go away. Real resolution comes from working through conflict, not avoiding it through accommodation. Assess whether relationships energize or drain you. Authentic relationships generally leave you feeling energized, valued, seen. Relationships based on your people-pleasing leave you feeling drained, used, invisible. Trust your energy as information about relationship health. If you consistently feel worse after interacting with someone, the relationship might not be healthy, regardless of whether they seem nice or you care about them. Set boundaries early in relationships rather than waiting until resentment builds. The earlier you set boundaries, the easier they are to maintain. Relationships form around the patterns you establish early. If you establish boundaryless availability from the start, changing later feels like breaking an implicit contract. If you establish boundaries from the beginning, they are just normal part of the relationship. Share vulnerably, but not without discernment. Authentic relationships include vulnerability, sharing your struggles, fears, and imperfections. But vulnerability should be mutual and earned. If you are always vulnerable and they are never vulnerable, the relationship is one-sided. If you share deeply and they use that information against you, they have not earned your vulnerability. Share incrementally and assess how information is received before sharing more deeply. Surround yourself with people who can handle your authenticity. Some people are threatened by honesty, growth, or change. They prefer surface pleasantness to authentic depth. These people cannot be your close connections. Seek out people who value honesty, who can handle conflict, who support growth, who celebrate your authenticity even when it is messy. These people are rare, but worth finding. Join communities aligned with your values. Instead of trying to force authentic connection in contexts that do not support it, find communities where authenticity is valued. Therapy groups, personal growth workshops, online communities for people in recovery, spiritual communities that emphasize truth. These contexts make authentic connection easier because everyone is working towards similar goals. Be patient with authentic relationship building. It takes time to find your people and build genuine connections. You might feel lonely during recovery as old relationships fade and new ones have not yet formed. This loneliness is temporary and worth enduring for the possibility of real connection. Do not return to inauthentic relationships just to avoid loneliness. Stay the course and trust that authentic connections will develop. Remember that quality matters more than quantity. You do not need many relationships. You need a few genuine ones. As you recover, your social circle might shrink. This is normal and healthy. You are prioritizing depth over breadth, authenticity over convenience, genuine connection over performance. A few real friends are worth infinitely more than many surface connections. Practice being okay with being disliked. Not everyone will like your authentic self. This is not a problem. This is reality. You will not like everyone either. Compatibility is real. Some people just do not mesh. Instead of trying to make everyone like you through pleasing, accept that your authentic self will appeal to some and not others. Focus your energy on relationships with people who genuinely appreciate you rather than trying to win over people who do not. Authentic relationships are your reward for recovering from people-pleasing. They are the connections that were not possible while you were performing. They are the depth that comes from being seen and loved for who you actually are rather than what you provide. They are worth every difficult step of recovery. They are evidence that you can be fully yourself and still be loved. They are the proof that your authentic self is not just acceptable, but valuable. These relationships do not require performance because they are based on truth, and truth is the only foundation for genuine connection. Chapter 12. Your recovered life awaits. You have now explored every dimension of the disease to please, from its origins to its costs to its recovery. The final piece is envisioning what life looks like on the other side of recovery. What does a life free from chronic people-pleasing actually feel like? A recovered life feels lighter. You are not carrying the weight of everyone's needs, expectations, and emotional states. You are not performing constantly to maintain approval. You are not walking on eggshells trying to keep everyone comfortable. You have put down the burdens that were never yours to carry. This lightness is not irresponsibility. It is appropriate responsibility. You are responsible for yourself, your choices, your well-being, not for everyone else's happiness. A recovered life includes genuine rest. You can actually relax because you are not always on duty, always available, always monitoring for ways to help. You have permission to simply be without needing to serve. You have space just for yourself without guilt. This rest is restorative in ways you have never experienced because you have never truly rested before. You have only had the exhausted collapse of burnout disguised as rest. A recovered life contains authentic relationships. You are known for who you actually are, not for what you provide. People value your presence, not your service. You experience genuine reciprocity, where both people give and receive. You feel seen, valued, and appreciated for your authentic self. These relationships nourish you rather than drain you, because they are based on mutual care rather than one-sided taking. A recovered life includes healthy boundaries maintained without excessive guilt. You say no when you need to. You set limits to protect your well-being. You honor your needs without feeling selfish. These boundaries are just a normal part of how you operate, not battles you fight constantly. They feel right rather than wrong because you have internalized that you matter, your needs matter, and self-care is not selfishness. A recovered life has space for your authentic desires and interests. You have time and energy for what genuinely matters to you because you are not giving all your resources to everyone else. You pursue hobbies, goals, and activities that are yours, not things you do because someone asked or expected. Your life reflects your values and preferences rather than others' demands. A recovered life includes self-respect. You respect yourself because you honor your values, keep commitments to yourself, and treat yourself well. This self-respect is not based on being liked by everyone or never disappointing anyone. It is based on being authentic and aligned with your truth. You can look at yourself in the mirror and feel good about who you see because you are living with integrity rather than performing for approval. A recovered life contains genuine kindness. You are still kind, but your kindness comes from choice rather than compulsion. You help others because you genuinely want to and have capacity, not because you fear rejection if you do not. This makes your kindness more meaningful because it is chosen and given from fullness rather than extracted from emptiness. You are kinder to yourself as well, treating yourself with the same care you give others. A recovered life feels like yours. You are the author of your choices. You direct your life according to your values. You make decisions based on what works for you rather than what others expect. This ownership creates deep satisfaction because you are living your life rather than performing in everyone else's play. The transition from diseased to recovered is not easy. It requires courage, persistence, patience, and commitment through all the difficult phases. But it is possible. People do recover from people-pleasing. They learn to set boundaries. They develop capacity to say no. They build authentic relationships. They reclaim their lives from the tyranny of others' expectations. You can be one of these people. The disease to please is not virtue. It is pathology that is slowly killing your soul. But it does not have to continue. You have the power to change. You have the capacity to recover. You have the right to live for yourself rather than everyone else. Your recovered life is not somewhere distant and impossible. It is a series of choices starting now. One boundary set. One no spoken. One need honored. One moment of choosing yourself rather than performing for others. Start today. Start now. Do not wait for permission, perfect conditions, or certainty. Start with one small act of self-honoring. Then tomorrow, another. Then the next day, another. These choices compound. Small daily decisions to choose yourself over approval add up to profound transformation over time. Until one day, you realize you are no longer dying from the disease to please. You are living in recovered authenticity, and your soul, once suffocating beneath performance, is finally breathing free. The disease to please has been killing your soul, but recovery will save it. Your authentic life is waiting. You are the only one who can claim it. And the time to begin is now. Stop pleasing everyone. Start living your life. Your soul depends on it.